Hello everyone, Davey here. We're only 1 week away from the release of Batman Arkham Knight. For the 99.99% of us, because apparently there's a 0.001 of people out there, at least I'm hypothesizing on that apparently there was an article that some people, at least one person, has broken the street date for Arkham Knight. And that is very unfortunate, not so much for that person, but for us, because we don't know if this guy or girl is a dick. So and they're gonna go on the internet and post spoilers and all that shit, and that has me very, very worried. But for the remaining of us who are anticipating to get Batman Arkham Knight legitimately, we're only 1 week away to savoring our delight of finally getting to play as the Batman once more. And to commemorate that, I'm going to go ahead and review so far the only Arkham Knight figure that I have purchased so far, because there's a possibility I might purchase some more. I'm still indecisive of whether or not I'm going to do that. The only two other figures that kind of catch my interest are Nightwing and Robin, and those guys are not going to get released until later on this year. And right now we do have Scarecrow and Harley Quinn out there, but I'm not sure if I want to buy them. The only thing that tempts me into buying them is the fact that I have the two Harley Quinns from Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, and I have the Arkham Asylum Scarecrow, so I kind of want to complete the set, but at the same time, that's kind of betraying my morals, because I've sworn to myself, I swore to myself, that I was not going to be that guy who just collects to have the collection. And the only reason why I would collect figures is because I genuinely wanted those figures. And that is why I'm going to be reviewing Batman Arkham Knight Batman right here, because out of all the figures that are out right now for Arkham Knight, this is the one that I definitely wanted as soon as I saw it, because I wanted to collect all Batman figures from all of the Arkham games, even Arkham Origins, because they all look great. And I wanted to genuinely collect them, not just for having them, but because I sincerely wanted the figures and wanted to play around with them. And so here we have Arkham Knight Batman. He's obviously got the much more armor-like suit that he's going to have in Arkham Knight. And for the most part, it looks pretty good. I mean, the detail on this guy is pretty immense. There's a couple of instances where I feel like they could have etched in a little bit more detail, especially in the cowl. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. As you can see, the cowl, the mold and sculpt of the head itself is pretty good, especially the paint job on the eyes. It looks like a legitimate face, as opposed to the white eyes on the Arkham City version that I have, or the really blue eyes from the Arkham Asylum. So far, the only other figure that comes into contest with the head sculpt on this guy would be the one from Arkham Origins, where he has the 5 o'clock shadow, which they painted on somewhat nicely. I mean, from certain angles, especially up close, it would look like a smear of dirt, but from a distance, it would look like he sincerely had a 5 o'clock shadow. And I'm referring to the Arkham Origins figure here, not so much, but still he has a really good head sculpt. The only slight disappointment is that we know that his cowl is made out of different pieces because it's an armor, and we don't really get any kind of detailing on that. But for the most part, the rest of his armor looks pretty cool. The only thing that I'm not a humongous fan of is how this, and this is not so much a problem with the figure, or just the figure, but also a problem with the design of his armored suit in the game, from what I can tell from the trailers and the commercials and all that, and all the gameplay footage, is that I'm just not a huge fan of how the armor makes him look a bit slimmer. For some reason, he just doesn't look like that hulking beast that he is in Arkham Asylum and City. For some reason, he just looks slimmed down. I mean, he still looks powerful, he still looks like the Batman, but there was something about his look in Asylum and City that just looked like a comic book iteration of Batman brought to life. And being able to play as him was just so badass and awesome. Here, the armor itself looks cool, but I just don't like how it makes the proportions of his body look a bit slimmer. He still looks like a very nimble and agile and tough to beat Batman, but I just prefer his much more massive look that he had in City and Asylum as opposed to this one. But still, I digress, and he's still, if you're going to make a different look to Batman in your next game, at least put some detail into it, and I feel like they did that not only with the design of Batman in the game, but also with the figure here. You got some good paint job, you got some good sculpt, the detailing is nice. Again, I just don't like how kind of flimsy his legs look, but that's not because of the figure itself, but because of how they designed Batman to be. However, I do like how his shins look. The molding and the paint job on his shins looks rather nice. So that's pretty cool. The cape is made out of rubber once again. This time it does feel a bit flimsier in a very uncomfortable way, to the point where if I feel like I bend the cape high enough, it's going to tear off. But of course I'm not going to be doing that very frequently. Still, it's a little bit of a minor concern, but I do like how they etched in some of the lining here on the cape. As you can see, they got the little lining going across there and then at the bottom. And it's certain details like that that should be presentable when Arkham Knight does get released on next-gen consoles. Besides that though, he still looks pretty awesome. It's just a matter of preference of whether or not you like this design of the Batsuit. Now with Articulation is where we kind of get into the mixed bag portion of this figure. The articulation is actually pretty good. In fact, there's some surprisable areas where I feel like they could have just sufficed with just one joint, but instead they gave us double jointed segments of this figure. Now the head is able to rotate 360 degrees, however the joint is shaped rather strange, to where it kind of it doesn't snap, but it like fits when it's facing forward, and then when you want to move it around, you'll feel like a little bit of force, and it'll go. You know, you don't have to be afraid of breaking it. It doesn't feel like it's very fragile. It just feels like the joint is shaped a certain way to where it snaps back into position when it's facing forward. But still, you get to move the head 360 degrees. It pivots slightly up and down about that far. And then we get to the arms, and this is where the bad portion of the articulation comes into play, mainly because of their choice to put certain things on his armor that didn't really mix well with the articulation. I honestly did not know what they were thinking with this. And that's mainly in the shoulder area. As you can see, in the shoulder area, he's got these shoulder pads, as Batman tends to have. He's always going to have shoulder pads one way or another. However, what they decided to do is to take these shoulder pads, which are made out of rubber, and glue them onto the side of his bicep, of his arm right here. They're glued here, right there. Not at the top. They're glued right there. So let me see if I could show you an example. When I move the arm upwards, you can see the piece starts to move a little bit and kind of overlaps the cape. Let me see if you can see it from the back there. Oh, this is better. Look at this. See? It's on his arm, not on his shoulder, and so when I move this up, the piece kind of bends forward because it's made out of rubber. And on his left arm is where it's the less bothersome. It's on his right arm where, and as you can see, it kind of pops out like that, and you have to pop it back in because it's made out of rubber, so it's going to be warped a little bit. But on his left arm, it's where on his right arm, I'm sorry, is where it's even more worrisome, because for some strange reason, when they glued these rubber pieces to his arms, it was on his right arm where they glued it the least, and I feel like if I stretch this arm high enough from this ball joint here, it's going to detach. This thing's going to come off, and I'm going to have to super glue it back in, and who knows if I'm going to be able to move this arm at all in the future. So if I move this up like this, you can see right there, the piece starts to kind of peel back. It's almost like a scab. I'm sorry if I'm using a very gross analogy here, but it's almost like a scab peeling back right here. And if I move the arm up high enough, this thing's just going to come right off. Poor design choice in my opinion. I feel like this should have been glued at the top, and it should have been glued a little bit better to where it holds on to the cape more so than it does to any other piece of this area of the figure. And since it would be doing that, it wouldn't make me worried about moving this arm forward, because it's glued to enough of the figure, and with strong glue at that I won't have to worry about breaking it off. Whereas here, it's only glued by this little section of his arm that I feel like if I move this arm high enough, this piece is just going to come off at any point, and that bugs me. Gosh, what is up with that? I mean, I know you guys DC Collectibles was trying to do something new with this figure, but it just doesn't work for me. I feel like these pads should have been glued or attached to the top of his cowl here, especially with these two other rubber pieces right here that are supposed to be part of his armor, as opposed to his arms. Now, besides that little issue, he does have some more articulation in the arm. He actually has two joints in his elbow, and it is in his right hand, I mean his right arm, I'm sorry, is where he's able to demonstrate that the best, because unfortunately on my figure, I'm sure there's not every single figure has this problem, but for my figure, only one of the joints on his elbow and his left elbow is able to move, like so, at a 90-degree angle. He would be able to bend his arm further back because of the second joint, which is cool. Again, it's cool that they added 2 joints instead of 1, but unfortunately for me, for this particular figure, one of the joints is stuck, and if I try to move it, there's a really likely chance I'm going to break it. I'll try using a blow dryer or some hot water maybe in the future, but for now, that's as far as it moves for his left arm. But his right arm is able to bend all the way like so because of the double joints. His wrists are able to move 360 degrees as well as bend inwards and outwards like so. There's a little bit of a joint within the wrist right here apart from the swivel that is able to move the fist, or the wrist, I'm sorry, inwards and outwards slightly. He happens to have an ab crunch joint that is a little tough to move because it feels like it's ratcheted to an extent, but it does move like so, about that far in, there you go, and then about that far back, maybe a little bit more, one more, yeah, that's as far as back as it goes, so you can do those ab crunches. He also has a waist swivel, however it doesn't move all the way because it starts to feel a little bit tight, but it does move about that far to each side. He's got ball joints at the top of his leg that allows his leg, I'm sorry, to flex forward that far, and then about that far back, as well as to the sides. In fact, he can do almost a full bat split, like so. Let's go ahead and rotate those forward, like so. It also has an upper, at that same exact joint, you're able to rotate the legs inwards and outwards about that far. And then, much like the elbows, you can bend at the knee with 2 joints and bend about that far back. And then, I believe there is no shin swivel like before, but there is a foot joint that is able to give him a slight pivot, as well as move the foot up and down. And that pivot is kind of weird because there's a little bit of a restriction to where if you try to pivot it a certain way, it's going to automatically pivot that way instead of going, like, for example, going forward and then pivoting slightly to the right or slightly to the left. It's going to go a certain way. It's hard to explain. You would only be able to know this for sure if you own the figure yourself, but it does have a ball joint that is able to provide some pivoting movement as well as up and down, but it has this restriction that's kind of difficult to explain, but it's there. Now, the Arkham Knight version of Batman here wasn't as heavy on the accessories as previous figures, but still, you know, you got your basics. However, I felt like they were just a little bit more disappointing this time. For one, we got the Batarang, like we always do, and it looks exactly the same as any other Batarang would come with these Arkham figures. The only downside this time, however, is that despite having a little etching on the blade, and they went ahead and they painted it, I don't know if it's coming across well on camera, but there's a little bit of a silver etching at the edges of the wings, which is pretty cool. However, the downside is that unlike the previous Batarangs that came with the previous figures, this one does not fold inwards. The other ones were made out of 2 pieces, and you would be able to fold them in for accessibility, to make sure that you don't break it because it'll be extended, and that lessens the risk of breaking it because it's much more of a compact little accessory. This time you're gonna have to watch out for where you put this because this does not retract or fold in any kind of way. So if you bend this at an angle, it's gonna break. Sorry to break it to you, but that's just how it is. And it does fit into his hand, either one of his hands that he has right here rather nicely, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and try fitting the Batarang into this hand, which is a much more close-fisted hand. So there you go. Holding his Batarang, as you can see. And then his other accessory is the zipline grapple gun, or zipline gun, from the previous games. In almost every game, he's bound to come across the zipline device here. And it looks rather neat. I mean, there's not much to it except that it looks accurate to how it does in the video game. You got 2 little prongs right here that are supposed to extend to the side, and then they shoot out like that, and that's how he creates his zip lines and gets around. However, the twist to this little accessory is that he actually comes with a second hand to be able to hold it. And as you can see, the hand is molded exactly the same way as his other one, and it's for his left hand. And it looks fairly similar to the hand that he already has. In fact, for a second, for a small fraction of a second, I thought that DC Collectibles shipped me the same exact hand of the left hand, and I felt, for some reason, I felt like it should have been the right hand, and I'm like, guys, I think you gave me the same one from before. I don't think you got it right, but it is. And the thing about this hand, and I tried them, and this is how I found out that they actually got it right, is that this hand is molded in a specific way to be able to hold this grapple gun, because it does have a handle with 2 holes in there that are molded in a certain way to be able to be held by this hand. So you go ahead and you fit the handle into his hand, you fit the index finger and then the middle finger into those 2 holes, with the remaining 2 fingers and including his pinky down below here, and there you go. He's able to hold the zipline gun with that hand. And of course, you're able to go ahead and remove his left hand, which is usually a little bit easier than that, but it does come off with a little peg there. And you simply just take the other hand, fit it into the hole with the peg. And what's kind of cool is that it also has the same exact articulation. It still has that joint that is able to make the hand bend inwards and outwards like that. And there you go. There he has his zipline gun ready for action, as well as his batarang. And another thing I didn't like is that, and this is probably just my figure, but who really knows, depending on how DC Collectibles decided to package their Batman figures, but his ears came kind of warped, so every so often I need to bend them a certain way to make sure that they're pointing straight up instead of to an angle, and he looks more like Vampire Batman rather than regular Batman because of how warped his ears are on his cowl. But there you go. There is Arkham Knight Batman. Now for some comparison for, well, it might just be the last comparison, considering that this is probably the last Batman figure from the Arkham series from DC Collectibles, considering that this is Rocksteady's last game, unless they hand over the duties to Warner Bros. Montreal and they keep pumping out Arkham games or Batman games in general. Let's go ahead and compare Batman, Arkham Knight, Batman. Well, let's just call him Arkham Knight Batman. It's very redundant. Let me go ahead and put him right here, center him for the camera. And now, to his left, we got Arkham Origins Batman with his 5 o'clock shadow. Right there. We got Arkham Asylum Batman. Actually, let's go ahead and move this guy more over here. This guy more over there. There's Arkham Asylum Batman. And Arkham City Batman. Now let me go ahead and have all of them look at the camera. Ready to kick yo ass, break your bones, and take some names. For time's sake, I'm not going to try to put him in any specific poses except for Arkham Knight here. He's definitely going to stay in that pose, but let me go ahead and center the camera here a little bit more. So there you go. The entire Bat Gang. The only thing missing is that exclusive Bruce Wayne figure that is supposed to come with a 5-pack of these 4 guys along with that Bruce Wayne figure. And I don't know, God only knows when that thing is coming out, but I'm very delighted to finally own Arkham Knight Batman and completing the set here. It feels awesome. And he is a good figure, despite my biggest issue with it is that, first of all, ooh, it's falling over. Batman, come on. Too many drinks? Really? You're better than that. Set an example for the kids. Anyways, yeah, I feel like the only main issue that I have with the figure are those shoulder pads that were molded just completely the wrong way. They should have been on his shoulder. And some more accessories would have been welcome. These 2 guys had more accessories than this guy did. Plus, I mean, what's with the unretractable batarang? That's a huge disappointment. But besides that, it's a good figure. Sure, I prefer the huskiness, the bulkiness of the design for the Asylum and City versions of the figure, but there's got to be some kind of logistic reason for why Batman has an armor this time around. Still, I prefer this design, but that doesn't stop this figure from being a good one. So for that, I give Arkham Knight Batman here a high 8 out of 10. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's definitely welcome in my collection, and I'm proud of owning him. So let me know what you guys think. Would you like to purchase this figure, or just simply skip on it, or wait for that 5-pack that comes with these 4 guys as well as an exclusive Bruce Wayne figure? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.